League of Legends related topic that really irks me. It kind of gets to me a bit because it just shows kind of like a level of ignorance about the situation that professional players in League of Legends are in. Is this sentiment that they just play games. All they do is get up and play games. And, you know, it's not even like a real pro athlete, or it's not like a real job, or imagine like a real, like a blue collar job that you're doing. And so why should we feel sorry for these people? Why should we have any sympathy with them? Why should we empathize with their plight where they feel burned out or they want to have a vacation? I mean, there's many different aspects in which this topic gets raised, and it's always lurking there to come out in certain expressions. And when it comes out, it seems to be reasonably well received, actually, when people express this sentiment. And so, specifically thinking from a League of Legends perspective, I found a quote a few months ago. I found a Reddit post, rather, that I think sums up most of the key points that I want to hit and attack of this kind of sentiment, because it's someone who is genuinely expressing this. And so, as ever, as I do with my Thorin versus Reddit, I won't reveal the name of the person, but this was a double-digit points post, and it went like this. I'll read it out. It was in the thread about G2 and the issue of like whether they should have been able to practice less before MSI and have the vacation and all the rest of it. And it said, meanwhile, pro sports players play long seasons and practice and prep all the time. God forbid a pro gamer has to scrim. The problem is gamers don't have discipline. I mean, seriously, you are preaching to people who are probably working 9 to 5, 5 days a week, working their lives away in the system, doing all their other life activities like yard work, food, shopping, family, etc. And you expect people to have sympathy for 17-year-old gamers who can't get their shit together and practice for 2 weeks when the only responsibilities they even have in life is to get up and play a video game? I mean, come on. That's it. They have to get up, play games for a living, but they can't man up and practice for 2 weeks for a major event, an event that their fans are counting on. Those same fans who spend whatever little free time they have between a 40 to 50 hour work week, life responsibilities, family, and even their own personal league time to watch them and or their VODs. Yeah, God forbid those fans get upset because their team didn't practice or try. It's an excuse, plain and simple, made because they are undisciplined and have no idea how the rest of the world operates. I'm sorry, there are tons of other sports players and real people who go just as long working, practicing, whatever, and still show up. All the other teams showed up, didn't they? CLG is there playing to play with no excuses. When all the other teams show up, even the other Western teams, and your excuse is you didn't have time to practice, it's an inexcusable excuse in my books. Obviously, terrible phrasing on that last sentence there. Now, that addresses many of the key points I want to make, even though obviously it's about a very specific instance, whereas I want to talk more generally about in League of Legends. So one of the key issues I see here is that the language that we use even for professional sports and professional video games is confusing people because it's the same language that those people themselves use in a different way in their everyday life. And so we call those competitors, those pro players, players, even in basketball players, League of Legends players. And we say that they play. Oh, he's played 872 games in his career. Oh, he's going to be playing 3 games this week. Well, play is the same term that you use. Well, I'm a League of Legends player. I play sometimes a game a day or something if I'm at home. So I'm using the same term there as though it means the same thing. Now, this is the issue because people have misunderstood what is entitled within playing, and they associate it with their own experiences of playing. Often, I see people criticizing players who are losing as if it's a lack of effort. Like they suggest they should just practice more and they should play more and this is your job. Now, to do so is downplaying how hard even like the 8th best team in an LCS division actually plays and how difficult the toil of that work to even get to that level might have been. If you contrast it with people who play pro with having a real job, such as office work, etc., that's what people often want to do, right? The problem here is that discussion especially tends to come up on this type of sentiment when it's a topic like burnout, players play too much in pro teams, there's too many events, they don't get enough breaks, and people will cite, but again, contrasting to a real job, contrasting the sports rather, they'll say, well, there's pro sports players who have to practice as much like this guy did, or you have a real job where he plays. Well, the sports angle, let's go with that, Zoe. So people will cite, well, you know how long sports seasons are. I mean, the NBA, for example, you play 82 games in the regular season before the playoffs. People will cite how in those sports you have daily practices, you're playing almost every other day, you're playing multiple games a week. I mean, completely ignoring, by the way, most of those sports have a large off-season where you get to do nothing. Doesn't really exist in the same way in League of Legends. But here's the first thing that we'll attack initially. Sports pros do not practice 8 hours a day on the days they're not playing the official games. First of all, the physical human body can't even practice that kind of amount. Like, you might hear these stories about, like, Kobe Bryant practicing, like, shooting jump shots 3 hours a day before the practice. Even then, he might practice 3 or 4 hours a day, then come in for a 2-hour practice. And not all of that practice will be constant physical work. Some of it will be theory of how they're going to play the offense, where people are going to go defensively. They might have a scrimmage or two, depending on what day it is in the week. They're not practicing fully for 8 hours a day. They're not playing the equivalent. I mean, the equivalent in terms of scrims to these games here that people are playing in practice as sports pros, it would be like if the NFL pro had to come in and he had to actually play 8 NFL games. Well, I mean, he couldn't play 8, could he? Because it'd take 3 hours all the time out. So let's say he had to play 4 NFL games in a day as his practice. That would be the equivalent to what the League of Legends pro is doing with all his scrims. The basketball player would have to play 8 basketball games in a day as his practice. Would be ridiculous, right? Doesn't happen. They don't practice nearly as much or in the same kind of sense. League of Legends pros really do have 6 to 8 hour scrim blocks. Those exist where you're playing what are essentially real games and you're trying to play them as if they were a real game and practice and improve and get to a performance level that would be the same as in the real game. I don't know if you've ever seen the sports pros who practice. Some of them dick around. Some of them who are star players. A famous example is Ronaldo, not the current one, the Portuguese one, the Brazilian one who was like a legend in like the mid to late 90s to the early 2000s. They played for like PSV Eindhoven, Barcelona, Real Madrid. This guy was actually famous because in practice, supposedly he gave like a third of his effort and he was still incredible in practice, but then in the games he was godlike. And everyone always said, oh, what could he have been if he'd have actually invested all his effort in practice? Some players do invest their effort. Some nutters who are really so into the game and so driven do. Some people just take time off. In these scrims here, you take time off here, you just dick around in scrims here, you'll get a really bad rep with your teammates, you'll probably get outed publicly, and one day your career will probably be over as a result of this, unless you are some ultra godlike player. And by the way, the Koreans aren't taking time off like this. So League of Legends pros actually practice more and in a more difficult fashion than sports pros. Then you got to add in, most of those sports pros get paid millions of dollars simply for the output of what they do in the game, not necessarily their success. So you can get paid millions of dollars and be a player who's good or very good, and that's it. Nothing more is actually required. Like if you're the 9th best team in a sports league, so let's say the NBA, 9th best team, let's say you're the 5th best team in the Eastern Conference, you're going to make the playoffs, you're going to have decent regular season, people are going to come to the stadium to watch you. If you're a flashy player, if you're a skillful player, if you're a well-loved player, people are going to love watching you play, they're going to cheer for you, you're going to get paid your money, people are going to say you did a good job, you're going to do your media appearances, you might every now and then make it to the conference semi-finals or maybe the conference finals if you have a really good run in the NBA. Otherwise, maybe you got in the first round or the second round of the playoffs. No big deal. Yeah, sure, people would like you to do more, but ultimately you did your job. That's good enough. Now let's consider that in that sense, you're essentially treating even pro sports as a job still. You do your job, you do your best, and that's it. Ultimately, it's all right to have that sort of a career trajectory. Now let's consider if you are in the NALCS, the equivalent of the NBA in North America, right? If you're the 9th best team in the LCS, you are in relegation territory. People are telling you all the time, you're either just not good enough outright, so you should quit, get out the game, or you're not good enough because you haven't practiced enough. You should practice more. They're questioning your character as a person. What, you can't practice as much as these Koreans? What, you can't, you disrespect people who have blue collar jobs by not just playing 10 hours a day and just putting every single piece of your effort into this game for the fans. They question your character, they question your skills. Maybe you just never were even good enough. Oh, you're a fucking loser, that's what you are. They even question whether you should be allowed to be a pro, as though it's like some sort of thing that anyone's allowed to do. It's a performance metric sport, you idiot. Now, esports pros don't play during their practice time. They practice. This is what makes them different in how they play the game from how you play the game when you play for fun. The huge difference And this is one that is unfortunately going to be very difficult for people to understand the nuance of if they haven't been around these players when they practice or been a part of it as a pro in some sense. Which is when you play, a casual player, you play, your primary goal ultimately is fun. Now, you can define fun however you want. You might say fun is actually to win the game. You need to win to have fun. But most people, to have fun is to do the things they want to do, sometimes to be impulsive, to get kills in the game if they're a support, to get great assists, to help people out, to land cool combos, to have cool moments in the game, to have an enjoyable experience throughout the game where people aren't flaming them, where people are working together, where at all parts of the game it feels like you have a chance or there's like resistance just enough to make it a lot of fun. Ultimately, fun is really the primary quality that most people seek when they play the game. Now, the problem here is that, sure, some people might not only go for fun. They might, like, for example, they might define fun as to improve, or they might define fun as to win. But ultimately, the key distinction to make is that the person playing, just like they do as a casual player, is always capable of expressing his right to just choose to dick around, to choose not even to try to win, to choose not to try to improve, choose to try to just do something right now that in this instant feels fun or feels more fun than what he was doing, and even dick around in the game and not do very well and just try stupid stuff and mess around. He can always do this, and it's always his prerogative to do this. He can slack off anytime he wants, have fun, not take it seriously, and it's not an issue. That's fine. This is exactly where the pro does not have that prerogative. Practicing as a pro means playing with purpose. It means working. You are working to do your job at a high level. You are attempting to improve your synergy with 4 specific individuals. You can't just have a bad game like as a normal pro player, normal casual player who's playing in solo queue. So he just queues up again, gets a different group of people. Cool, that's a different environment. I'm playing differently. I might not even fit with those guys. This guy, this support fits for me as an AD carry. Cool, I'm having a fun game again. No, you're trying to play with these 4 specific individuals, get your chemistry improved with them, improve team chemistry as a whole, how the unit operates, which might mean doing something that's not fun for you to sacrifice for the team. You're trying to implement individual changes to your game, so you're improving as you go on, but at the same time accomplishing the team's goals of how they want to play, what they should have done in this situation. You might even be practicing for specific opponents, so you're not even practicing just to be your best in the most general, abstract sense. You're trying to practice for a specific style of opponent. That might mean grinding against certain opponents again and again, asking them to play a certain way against you. That kind of practice is very rarely fun in the sense that you have fun when you play. Add in that these pros, as part of their job, live away from their families and see their families quite rarely. Like every day, if I have a bad game, I could go and see a dog or something that I have in the house, or see a sibling I have, or see my parents or something, or could go and meet a friend for a beer, and I could chill out and I could vent and I could let off. I could even, if I have a dog or something, I could even like stroke it during the games and go, oh, there we go. Yeah, whatever. It wasn't a big deal. All these scenarios, it's not the same for these guys. They live sequestered away from their family, away from their support network, away from their home comfort area in this team house somewhere, and the majority of them. And as a result, they're in a much more stressful environment because they live with their teammates in most cases. And that makes for a very stressful environment. Think about it. Just because someone is qualified, as in good enough at a video game, to be a professional at it and therefore be your teammate, how would that ever suggest that he could also be a friend to you or be a good support network for you, or that I might even care about you, or he might even be civil in terms of how he behaves around the house? Doesn't suggest any of those things. Just suggests he's good enough at the video game to get into the same team house as you initially. So as a result, you can see how stressful this could be in many cases. Remember, most of these teammates as well, now that we live in an import culture, come from different countries. This is always was the case in Europe, by the way, but people, NA fans always overlooked it. Now NA is having to experience the same problem. You've got players that are from different backgrounds. Some are wealthy, some very poor. Some come from a middle-class area where things were given to them, or there were programs. Some come from different countries, so they have different languages, different understandings of the world, different cultures, so they have different value systems, things that are important to them, things that are offensive to them. All of these things mixed to one, and you have to just act as though that guy was just any person working with you, as in a real world job. That guy working with you probably lives in the same fucking city as you, probably has a similar background to some degree as you, certainly is qualified in the same way as you to do this job to some degree. So when people cite real jobs, think about this. You don't have to live with your fucking boss and your co-workers in your real job. Think of what a nightmare that would be. At home, you get to go home each night, blow off some steam, do whatever the fuck you want, call that guy an idiot, an arsehole, say whatever the fuck you want about him. doesn't matter, it's not an issue. So the pressure in this sort of a job, the pros job, is immense to succeed. Your owners have invested all this money into you and are driving you constantly, no matter how you're doing in the league, driving you constantly because they put all this money into you. You represent a spot in their system that they think they could have given to someone else if you're not performing well enough. Your teammates expect you to do your job and perform, else their careers are at stake. They know that it doesn't matter if they're playing fantastic. If you're playing badly, they're going to put blame on you. They're going to put pressure on you. They're not going to be a support network for you. They're going to drive you and think, you need to succeed as well, in many cases. If you want time to yourself, time with friends, having fun in the traditional sense, this might even be frowned upon if your team feels that you could give more, or the results aren't where they are, or you're doing well, but now you have to practice super hard for the upcoming finals. Now let's contrast that to a real job, shall we? First of all, when most people say they work 9 to 5, and those are the hours they cite as their job, the hours that they actually cite compared to the hours that they actually do work in, productive, focused, purposeful working, are a fucking joke. I know this because I've known many people who had jobs like this, and I've even been in this situation myself. I've seen studies that showed that productivity across most office-type jobs was as low as like 40% across the board in companies. And that's why it was able to exist, because everyone was working at like 40% productivity. And as a result, it doesn't matter that you're only doing 42%, because that might be higher than the other people in the office who are doing 38%. And your boss in his own position might only be doing 40%, might be slacking off a bunch. Most people, from my experience, treat actual jobs, not something that's a labor of love, as jobs. They treat it the same way they treated school. They go there, they do the bare minimum, or they do an okay job, a satisfactory amount, and then they wait until it's time to go home. And the second it's time to go home, they stop thinking about the whole thing completely. They go home, they forget about it all, they mess around, they do whatever the fuck they want, and then they come in the next day, and then they start again, 40% productivity, slacking off every now and then, doing the minimum they can, just getting what's out. If they ask to do something a day, they'll just do that. They won't do any more than that. This is the sort of world most people live in. And part of the reason why there's the 40% productivity is because people choose to slack off. That's how you get rid of the stress of having to do a difficult job, right? Or one that you don't want to do. So what do? You go on Facebook, you message people on your phone, you read Reddit, whatever it might be. This is the sort of things you're doing. Now, as a pro, you can't do this during your scrim blocks. You can't do this during your actual practice time, during your work hours. If you do these things while you're supposed to be doing those, then you'll be considered a terrible teammate. People at real jobs don't spend all those hours working, improving, performing at a high level, performing at their highest level. They don't do these things. That's just, go and look at the world and how it actually plays out pragmatically, not in your fictional, ideal, idyllic world of what a job is like. Now let's contrast the pro's life to a blue-collar job, shall we? Now, first of all, this is a ridiculous thing to contrast a pro player's job to anyway, because most people I know or know of who do blue-collar jobs, and by the way, I've had relatives who are blue-collar workers their whole lives, these people do not do these jobs because they want to. They do these jobs because they have to. Either they're too poor, they're not in a position to get into another job. They lack better opportunities. No one wants them for any other jobs. They're too poorly educated to be capable and qualified of doing other jobs. Or even worse, maybe they're actually just not mentally equipped or physically sometimes equipped to do a better job. And so they're just not in a position where they can do better jobs. They have to do blue-collar jobs if they want to earn that money. And so, like I say, most of these people, if they could choose to themselves, would choose to do a better job. And if they wouldn't choose to do a better job, when they could, then why the fuck are we contrasting them to pro players anyway? Bearing in mind, these people apparently choose to do terrible, really hard jobs that aren't very rewarding and don't actually even financially reward you very well. I mean, they're masochists at that point in time, so who gives a fuck, right? Why would we contrast that with a professional video game player and make that guy's job as hard as possible? Think about it. The fact that blue-collar jobs in general suck and incredibly hard doesn't mean that a pro player's job should suck as well. What kind of idiotic logic is that? And what level of lack of compassion is that? I mean, I feel compassion for the blue-collar person. I wish he didn't have to do that. But apparently you guys think, since that guy has to do it, all these pros should have a shit job that was like 9 hours grinding in a coal mine for it. No, that's a ridiculous kind of logic to use. Or the idea that if you don't do the 9 hours grinding in a coal mine, you can't complain about anything with your job or express frustration. I mean, what lack of basic human compassion is this? Now let's talk, since we're talking about blue-collar jobs, about the concept of physical strain versus mental strain. Now, imagine you had a physical job where your body couldn't match the physical strain upon you. First of all, it will become quite apparent very soon with injuries and an inability to even do the job that you're asked to do. You'd either be given time off to recover, and it'd be built into your job, You'd have to quit because you couldn't do it anymore. You'd be fired because you couldn't do it anymore. Or the people who hire for this job would learn what the physical strains are. They'd vet people before they hired them, and they wouldn't hire you to do that job. Now, here's the key distinction. We don't have numbers and data or any way actually to map and model where the mind snaps at mental strain in the way the body snaps at physical strain. Even worse, people assume because there's no physical symptoms, to the layman at least, that there is no mental strain. Now, what's great about this is, I remember there was an example. I listened to an interview with Noisia, okay? I think it was with Ordiz. I think that might have been the company. And they were talking here about this incredible studio setup they made. And because they were making drum and bass music and electronic music, that's very, very complicated. And you're trying to get very pure sounds and have the production levels be very, very high. So you're listening to stuff at high volume. You're trying to get it to be incredible, the way it resonates, etc. They'd built this studio environment that was so incredible that nothing in it vibrated and nothing made any echo or reverberation when they made the sound. So the problem they were actually having, believe it or not, was they didn't know initially, one of them, that they were damaging their ears because when they were blasting sound in there, it sounded great and nothing in the room was even vibrating. Whereas if you're in a normal room, when you blasted something that loud, the table would be like, so you'd know, well, holy shit, that's too loud, I gotta get that down. So as a result, he was damaging his ears, and he couldn't know this actually initially because he didn't have any signs around him to tell him. This is what it's like for people who manage these teams. Until the guy just snaps in the game and fucks up and quits and then literally has an emotional breakdown, says, I've got to quit the team, I have to go, I can't do this, oh, fuck all my teammates. Until that happens, you don't see the mental strain building up. And if you don't think mental strain exists, then I'd have to say, again, lack of human compassion. And also, you just haven't looked around the observable world as far as I can tell, or you've chosen to ignore it. So there's a great tweet here from Dexter, who's played a number of splits as a pro across 2 to 3 years. And here's what he said in a tweet in May of 2016. People that think that hard work is always designed as physical work probably never got mentally challenged to a point where they are exhausted. Then he replied to someone else, seeing people break is probably the worst thing ever. Don't think physical exhaustion is anything in comparison. Now his point here is, you can get mental strain to the extent you are mentally exhausted. You have nothing left to give in your mind and the energy level of your body. And even worse, when you get to that point and you snap, it's going to be terrible to see someone get an injury in real life. But a mental snap, bearing in mind your brain operates like how happy you are, how your outlook on life, whether you can go on with life, that could be even more devastating to see someone break that way, as Dexter apparently did in his career or throughout his time with friends who were pros, etc. I'll tell you a story, okay? It's of a Norwegian StarCraft 2 player called Snoot, and he's still known as one of the best foreigners now. But in 2012, it was when he was on the rise as a player, and he was really grinding. I actually wrote an article about this. You could probably Google it. It was on the T-Baser website. And as he was grinding, he was putting in so many hours to try and get better and better, and he was gradually sort of taking steps up of where his placings were and the sort of opponents he was beating. And as he was doing all this grinding, there was a point in time, I actually did a video interview with him, probably on the ACD Sport channel, where he discusses this. I think it's the interview. I'm not sure. It's either the grilled interview or it's the interview I do with him after he's won Home Story Cup at the end of 2012. But he mentions in this interview that there was a period of time where he'd heard that some of the best Korean pros sometimes could grind 50 games of StarCraft in a day. Now, obviously, a game of StarCraft can go like an hour. So obviously, all these games were going an hour. And remember, he did play Zerg, so people might six pool, you might get a lot of all-ins. So, okay, 50 hours a day, it's logistically possible, most cases. But it's going to be very, very hard. It's going to take up nearly all your day. But he decided, you know what? If that's really what some of these Koreans are doing, and I'm not doing it, and I want to be the best, and I can see a gap between me and them, fuck it. No one else is doing this in the West, but I'll try and do that. I'll try and grind 50 a day. In fact, I'll make myself do 50 a day. That'll be my rule. So you'd get up and you would always play 50 hours a day. It didn't matter what happened in those games, what was going on in his day. Not 50 hours, 50 games. He would play the 50 games a day, okay? Now what he found was just the sheer mental strain. Forget how well you do in the games, how well you improve. The sheer mental strain of playing the 50 games a day was destroying his mind. He would literally have dreams where all his dreams, he was obsessed. He thought in his dreams that he was in the game. It took over his whole life. All he was thinking about was the game. And the mental strain was incredible. To the extent that when he became very good, he didn't do the 50 games a day anymore. Likewise, in StarCraft 2, and the reason why StarCraft 2 is a good game, because since it's an individual game, you can push yourself to levels you wouldn't in a team, and that a team manager wouldn't let you push yourself to, especially if you are like Nanawa and the other foreign players who went to Korea and tried to practice in Korea on their ladder, in their team house environment. First of all, most pros who went to Korea like that, the reason why most of them only went for a few weeks or a month or a couple of months, then definitely came back to Europe, even though it was the best training environment, is because they couldn't handle the strain of playing as much as these people do. Like some of them tried initially to go into these team houses and let the Koreans like, hey, put me on the list. Just treat me like I'm a Korean. Tell me how much to practice. Tell me what to practice. And what you find out is that schedule will kill you. You have to sleep when they tell you to sleep. You have to eat when they tell you to eat because they're lining up your practice partners. You have to practice when they tell you to practice. If you're losing in a certain way, they'll tell you to practice a certain build 20 times on the ladder against a certain race. This will kill you compared to what people are normally used to do. Even worse, that your actual happiness and your level of satisfaction over your game will be very low. Because when people would initially go to Korea like this, nearly all foreigners, as soon as they went there, would have a losing win rate on the ladder. It would take a month or two till you finally kind of got the shit kicked out of you and all your bad habits kicked out of you so that you could improve enough, you could get to a level where you were like winning more than 50% of your games and then you were actually doing well against the Koreans. Most foreigners couldn't even handle that first month. What would happen is they'd go there. They were used to being on the European ladder or the North American ladder, winning 70 to 80% of their games, trying to improve, but winning most of the time, feeling good about themselves, feeling like they're having fun, like they're improving. Then they'd go there, get the shit kicked out of them. They'd buy some barcode account that they'd find out wasn't even like a pro player or wasn't even a good player. And then they'd be like, fuck, I suck. Like I thought I was good. And then that mental strain alone, not even the physical of having to play the games, broke these guys, and loads of them had to go back and they couldn't handle it. And only people like Nanoa who could actually go through the mental strain of like, right, I know I'm going to be bad again, I've got to keep working, got to keep knowing that one day I'm going to be good again, could get through that. Now, this might sound like something that people think you can't say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Personally, I would take a physical job that is straining over a mental job that is straining any day of the week. Because with a physical job, you can literally outline your body to meet the physical strains. You can build muscle that's necessary, work the muscle. It'll actually, over time, what's an incredibly hard job to someone who's never done it, will become something that you can now handle. Your body is capable of doing so. You can fuel yourself correctly with the right sort of diet to be able to manage your energy levels and to be able to have enough energy to build the right muscles and all the rest of it, to be able to do this. You can even mentally handle the job itself. You can use the mental aspect to handle the job. You can make it a sort of working meditation if it's a very rote blue-collar job that you're doing one certain thing over and over again, maybe on a factory line. You can find a way to make this so it's not as stressful to the mind and so that the body is just perform these actions in a routine manner. You can do all these things. When you do that physical job, that blue-collar job, you're not having to self-review and constantly assess what the last thing was like and how to improve the next time. You're not having to work with coaches necessarily. Most of the time, if you're just doing the basics of the job, blue-collar job, you just pass the job. You're not having to perform at the highest level in the world in a zero-sum game, where it's not like the NBA player, good enough to be just good, because being just good isn't enough here. You have to be good compared to the best. And if you aren't as good as them, you lose, they win, it's a zero-sum game. And therefore, since you lost, you now have to play more, practice. That's what people will tell you at least anyway. And so you also, in the blue-collar job, don't necessarily have to motivate yourself to improve in any way. You don't have to put off your personal and social life. You can enjoy that when you go away at the end of it. So imagine at the end of all of that, at the end of all of the blue-collar job, you did all that, some fan comes along, no, rather at the end of doing the pro version of self-review, motivation, perform at the highest level, zero form game. At the end of all that, right, you then come to have a little break. You check on Twitter, Reddit, and some fan tells you that they are the reason that you won the game, that without them, you're nothing. And you know what? You're told that you better just swallow that sentiment. And if you want to make money and be loved, hell, pretend that it's true. Hey, even spout it as your own philosophy and words that you live by and reinforce this bullshit to this idiot who has no clue of the toil of your job if you want to succeed. Another aspect that doesn't work with blue-collar job or normal, real job. There's a public life that's part of being a pro now, which in most normal jobs does not exist and you will not experience. So when you contrast the hours someone works in that public job and the nature of the work, you're not contrasting it fairly at all because there are other facets to being a pro. So on top of practicing when you're a pro, you have to do promotional work, which might mean many hours. It might mean time off practice. It might mean have to do extra time to get the practice in otherwise. It might mean doing interviews, all sorts of things, people asking you difficult questions. That you also in real jobs aren't publicly judged for your work and don't receive masses of abuse in general cases. Now, most pros either must endure that abuse and that judgment, or they can simply no longer use Reddit, Twitter, and Facebook like a normal person. I always give this analogy, okay? Most things that people say on the internet are not a big deal. If someone says, oh, you're an idiot, you go, okay, who cares, right? At the most basic level, you just go, who cares? If you tried to break it down, you could go, he doesn't know me. I mean, what's his metric for an idiot? Does he even understand what I was saying there? You can do all this stuff, but mostly you'll just go, who cares, right? It's not a big deal. So I always give the analogy like this. The problem people don't understand is because they've never experienced it. They don't know the sheer scale, the weight of how many people might be saying that. So imagine walking down the local high street, whatever the main street is, or through a mall if you're in America, where all the shops are, right? And all the people are milling around going to the shop. Imagine you're walking down the street and someone just says, as you're walking past, like let's say your name is Bill, and someone just says, Bill, you're a fucking idiot. And it's not a friend of yours. They're not doing it joking, but just an idiot. Now, you probably might have the reaction I just had there, right? You'd probably just go, yeah, who cares, whatever. By the way, most people might not even. I know many people who go mental or try and find that guy, beat him up. Hey, who are you to say that to me? So, funnily enough, even normal people couldn't even fulfill their own advice there. But someone like me who's had the training in this, I could handle that, right? I could go, well, whatever. But now say I'm walking on the street and it's not one person goes, Bill, you're an idiot. Someone goes, Bill, you're an idiot. Someone goes, piece of shit. Goes, you're probably gay as well. Ha ha, you're so bad at your fucking job. Kill yourself. As you're walking on this one street or there's one mall, over a 10-minute span, hundreds of people telling you that. And within the hundreds, right, 2 people say, like, I think you're doing a good job. No, don't listen to them. You think at the end of that street, you would just still be going, yeah, I'm like the Buddha. I'm perfectly capable of not reacting to anything. You know, whatever. They don't know me. No problem. My emotional state's fine. I don't react to anything. No, people aren't like that. And anyone who presents themselves as some superhuman like that is absolutely a joke. Because, by the way, that's the same person who claims that they could handle it like that, and a pro should, yet then goes into solo queue. One person says something mean to them and like, how dare you? You have insulted me. This will not stand. Riot. Riot light. Like, that's the same person who fucking does that. So the point is, it's the whole straw that breaks the camel back. It's not the one comment, is it? It's the billions of them, and then one comes in on top of the billion, and you're at breaking point already, and then you're just like, fuck this. Why am I dealing with these people? Why am I doing this? Just because I'm good at a job that doesn't necessarily have to be connected to that. It just has been by the nature of promotional materials and fans wanting to believe that they're the whole reason you do the job, etc. So, bear in mind, all of that has become part of this job, as well as the hours of work, as well as even the success from the hours that you work and how much you improve. Even though the part that you are literally paid for isn't specifically outlined as that. You can even lose your entire job based on this one specific small area here if you spaz out in the wrong way. If you rage in a solo queue game as a pro player, suddenly you're the worst piece of shit who ever lived. Despite the fact, I don't know about you, I've said this many times, I don't know about anyone else in the world. I've raged out many times in solo queue games. I've actually been frustrated many times in my life. I'm not some fucking superhuman mix of like Buddha, fucking Jesus, Gandhi, all these people claim to be when they're judging pros at this, even though we know they aren't themselves. So don't say that they just play. They don't just play. They practice. They work. They toil. They don't play in the sense that you mean they play.